For this module, I'm going to teach you the basics of how to think about dance. We will discuss how to define dance, why studying it is important, and how to look at dance with a culturally sensitive lens. Beyond being crucial knowledge going forwards in this class, much of what I'll be talking about in this video can also help you view human movement in your day-to-day lives. So pay attention and listen closely throughout this lecture as we delve into the intricate world of dance. To begin, let's define the term dance. Historically, the term dance has been used in a plethora of ways, and whether we are talking about it in relation to the human body or as a descriptive term for an object, the defining element of the term dance is always linked to movement. Now, if we look at the dictionary definitions for dance, we often find them much more limited than many of the ways the term is so frequently used. The Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines dance as 1, to move one's body rhythmically, usually to music, to engage in or perform a dance, and 2, to move or seem to move up and down or about in a quick and lively manner. The Britannica dictionary definition states that dance is an art form or activity that utilizes the body and the range of movement of which the body is capable. When reading these definitions, can you think of other ways you might use the term dance that is not included here? How about the use of the term within the parable by Mehmet Murat Ildan stating, quote, "Dancing of the autumn leaves on the surface of a lake is a dream we see when we are awake," end quote. Or Alan Watts' famous statement, quote, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance," end quote. While the term often refers to the movement of the human body, its definition is clearly not dependent on it. So if the term is so broad, how do we even begin to parse it down within this course? We start by studying cultural forms having to do with the human body, with the knowledge that each form we study is an avenue to look at the wider context of movement in general. I therefore urge you throughout this course to constantly ask yourself how each form discussed broadens your own personal definition for dance. Look at each form as if it were a way to better understand the world of movement around you. Going forwards, we can fit all of the forms we will be discussing into the following categories: social dance, concert dance, ritual dance, site-based dance, and dance on film. When writing and discussing the various dance forms we delve into in this class, I urge you to use these terms to help you describe and categorize each form. By doing so, you will have a better understanding of the function that each form has within its cultural roots. Social dances are dances that have a social function and context. A few examples of social dance forms include samba dance, hip-hop dance, swing dance, and square dance. Concert dance is a form of movement performed for an audience. It is frequently performed in a theater setting, though it is not a requirement, and it is usually choreographed and performed to set music. Some examples of concert dance forms include modern dance, ballet, and Butoh. Ritual dances are dances that are part of or stem from a religious ritual. Some examples of ritual dances are Vodun, the Hora, and the Haka. Site-based dances are designed to exist in a certain place outside of a conventional performance space. Usually, site-based dances are also influenced by another type of dance, such as a form of concert or ritual dance. A few site-based dance examples are Trisha Brown's Roof Piece, performances by Bandaloop Dance Company, and Hopi Indian snake dances. Of these examples, both Trisha Brown and Bandaloop consider themselves modern dance-based, meaning they stem from a concert dance form, whereas Hopi Indian snake dances are also considered ritual dances that are meant to be performed at a certain site in a specific setting. Dance for film is presented through film and designed to be seen through film. It is often designed through a combination of choreography and film editing. Many of the performances you will watch were designed to be seen live, and therefore they were not considered dance for film, whereas many were designed, shot, and edited for film, meaning they are dances for film. Through this course, always ask yourself if what you are watching was designed to be seen on video or not. If you do not think it was designed for film as you watch, imagine you are watching it live. This will help give you a better understanding of the choices being made by the performers and the creators of the dances, and therefore allow you to think more critically about the movement as a whole. Some examples of dance for film include Missy Elliott's music video Get Your Freak On and One Flat Thing Reproduced by William Forsythe. In this class, it is also important to understand the vocabulary being used throughout your text and in the lectures. Here is a list of some of the more common terms used for you to refer back to when necessary. Most of your grades for this class are reliant on your ability to write about dance, and it is important when writing about dance that you are using these terms. Take a second to pause this video here and write down all of these definitions somewhere that you can refer back to regularly. Additionally, it is important to know the difference between the definitions of culture and of ethnicity. Culture is considered the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. Ethnicity is belonging to a social group that has a common national or cultural tradition. Now that you have a basic understanding of what dance is, you might be asking yourself why studying dance is important. Dance is considered a form of art. In fact, many of you may be taking this course to fulfill an art-based GE requirement. So a large part of why studying dance is important is because the arts help us analyze and question the world we live in and help promote critical discussions about the world that we live in. Studying the arts helps us to answer the question, how do we know the ways we want to influence and change the world? Furthermore, dance is considered a form of kinesthetic knowledge. Kinesthetic knowledge is the information that we keep in our moving bodies, information that we often don't consciously think about. Dance allows us to think critically about the ways in which kinesthetic knowledge manifests. Additionally, much of dance is designed to be viewed by an audience. When you view the material you are learning, you gain an understanding of it through your visual awareness. We call this type of learning visual learning. By watching dances, you will gain a visual understanding of how and why the body moves the way it does, and how to think critically about the visual world that surrounds you. Finally, in this class, you will be required to actively take 4 dance classes. Many dance forms are not designed to be watched, but rather to be experienced. When you actively engage with the learning materials by moving your body, you gain an understanding of the lesson through your experience. We call this type of learning experiential learning. In other words, you learn to do something through an active experience. By actively dancing in this class, you will gain an understanding of your personal relationship to your body and of each dance form you take a class within through your experience. Now that you have a general understanding of what dance is and why studying it is important, it becomes important to know how to watch dance in an effective way, especially as we will be looking at dances from many different cultures that frequently will not reflect your own. Joanne Kili'inohomoku argues in her article, An Anthropologist Looks at Ballet as a Form of Ethnic Dance, that all forms of dance are ethnic dance. It is important to recognize that this is not a recent article, However, its relevancy is still poignant. Within the article, Kili'i no Homoku specifically defines ethnicity as a group which holds common genetic, linguistic, and cultural ties with special emphasis on cultural forms. She further states that, quote, by ethnic dance, anthropologists mean to convey the idea that all forms of dance reflect the cultural traditions within which they are developed, end quote. Furthermore, quote, it is a gross error to think of groups of peoples or their dances as being monolithic wholes, end quote. In this class, we will look at all types of dance as both ethnic and culturally specific. In order to do so, we must use a culturally sensitive approach to dance. In your required reading for this module, 5 Premises for a Culturally Sensitive Approach to Dance, Deidre Sklar states that in order to analyze dance, we must understand, quote, since we all inevitably embody our own very particular cultural perspectives, we must do more than look at movement when we write about dance, end quote. To do this, we must understand that 1. Movement is a kind of knowledge. 2. Movement is conceptual, emotional, and kinesthetic. 3. Movement is intertwined with other kinds of cultural knowledge. 4. One has to look beyond movement to get at its meaning. And 5. Movement is always immediate and corporeal. When discussing movement as a kind of knowledge, Sklar explains that some gestures and movements have different meanings based on cultural norms. We must therefore ask ourselves what movements mean in relation to a dance form's cultural context. Are there any gestures you personally use regularly? What about gestures you can think of that are used regularly by the social groups within which you live? Maybe you thought of the meaning behind winking one eye, or perhaps the slight difference between how you gesticulate around your parents versus how you do so around your friends. Even the differences in the way one holds their body as they walk can be an indicator of cultural understanding. And that cadence can be completely different from one cultural context to another. One great example of movement as a kind of culturally specific knowledge is the hand sign depicted on this slide. In the United States, when you make this sign with your hand, it means okay. In Peru, however, it can also imply that you or the person you are signing to is homosexual. This is a completely different interpretation based on cultural and social context. Next, Sklar explains that movement is conceptual, emotional, and kinesthetic. By this, she means that movements that have cultural meaning bring with them conceptual, emotional, and kinesthetic value. Have you ever found yourself out of place when you've traveled or been somewhere new? Maybe you went to a new school and everyone did something slightly different than at the last school you went to, and you found yourself trying to figure out where to stand and where to sit. Or perhaps you went to a different country and noticed that people around you stood much closer than you felt comfortable with. As Sklar explains, the ways we move are inherently intertwined with our emotions, our felt experiences, and our conceptual understandings. The ways people are used to experiencing and valuing movement are conceptually, emotionally, and kinesthetically informed by our individual cultural experiences. Next, Sklar explains that movement is intertwined with other kinds of cultural knowledge. Think for a second about what things you need to understand culturally to understand what is happening through movement in the everyday. The example that Sklar gives here is of the concept of chivalry. What do you need to understand to be chivalrous, and how do you know what these things are meant to represent? When entering a monastery, what actions do you have to know to take in order to be respectful of the space you are within? Each of these actions is based upon the cultural context of the space and the people within it. Next, ask yourself if you think this is the same across cultures. For example, being chivalrous in a Catholic monastery requires completely different actions than being in a Buddhist monastery. Both differ vastly based on their cultural context. Due to the 3 previous reasons discussed, Sklar then surmises that one has to look beyond movement to get at its meaning. In order to look at movement with a culturally sensitive lens, one must think about both the movement and the context it comes with to understand the movement's meaning. Context is defined as the circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, or idea, and in terms of which it can be fully understood and assessed. Sklar states that, quote, the concepts embodied in movement are not necessarily evident in the movement itself, end quote. Are there movements you can think of that would take on a different meaning in one space than another? In order to ensure that we are looking at each dance style with a culturally sensitive lens in this class, it is incredibly important that we understand the historical and social context of each form we study. For each module in this course, you will therefore have to watch a brief historical and social background set of information in order to allow you to look beyond the movement to get at its meaning. Finally, Sklar concludes that movement is always immediate and corporeal, that while words help understand movement's meaning, they just don't say it all. We experience something called empathetic kinesthetic perception, which is a combination of mimesis and empathy. It is our body's ability to understand what other bodies are feeling and empathize with them. When you see someone crying, for example, it might make you feel sad. This is because your body creates an empathetic response, sort of like it's mirroring the body it witnesses. These felt responses happened ephemerally. In other words, they happen in a moment and then disappear. And they are experienced by your body's ability to relate to another body. When watching dance in this class, notice when you experience and interpret the movement based on a felt response within your own body. Let yourself experience and witness these felt responses, as they are just as important as the words you then write to describe your interpretations. And oftentimes in this class, you might feel that you cannot quite put into words what you felt. This is normal and one of the many, many wonders that make dance different from most other art forms. Beyond the advice given to us by both Kilio no Homoku and Sklar, when looking at movement in this class, we will be analyzing movement based on our own assumptions or associations generated by shared belief systems or cultural backgrounds, such as race, gender, sexuality, class, and religion. If we assume that dance is a reflection of culture, then much of its meaning is imbued with the assumptions and associations that culture makes, such as biases and stereotyping. As a part of your assignment for this module, you will be asked to watch an advertisement for Pepsi featuring Britney Spears. The advertisement was specifically designed to target audiences living in the United States, and much of how the creators made choices was based on playing on stereotypes of gender, sexuality, class, and race existent in the US. Note here that the cultural context is within the US. By doing so, they were able to create a message that is meant to lead U.S. audiences to believe that they want to be like Britney Spears and that drinking Pepsi would lead to that outcome. By using stereotypes within the U.S. during the time this was made, the creators were able to convey their message successfully. However, in doing so, they also solidified many of the negative assumptions or associations those stereotypes create for gender, for sexuality, class, and for race. In essence, while the creators were successfully able to advertise their product, they were simultaneously reinforcing biases on gender, sexuality, race, and class by asking audiences to believe the stereotypes used were true. When analyzing dances, such as in this advertisement, it is incredibly important that you ask what deeper message is being conveyed and what assumptions and associations are being used to do so. This will enable you to aptly parse the material for stereotypes and biases that could be problematic. Discovering these can then allow you to think more deeply about a dance's meaning and how that relates to its cultural context. In this lecture, I explained that we will define dance in this class by studying cultural forms having to do with the human body, with the knowledge that each form we study is an avenue to look at the wider context of movement in general. I then explained that studying art allows us to question, analyze, and critique the world we live in, and that studying dance in particular allows us to do so using kinesthetic knowledge, visual awareness, and experiential embodied learning. Finally, using texts by Joanne Kealiiu-Nähomoku and Deirdre Sklar, I explained that in order to look at dance with a culturally sensitive lens, one must always be aware of the cultural and historical contextual elements of the dance and understand that ephemerality of the art form is immediate and corporeal. One can then use this understanding to better understand how the dance creates ideological and cultural meaning. Once you have finished watching this lecture video, please move forward to complete the next part of the module.